1952, the year in which the United States became the center of the flying saucers phenomenon. Can you imagine walking peacefully through Washington, D.C. during the summer, and suddenly strange objects appear in the sky? You might think it would only happen in some Hollywood movie, when the truth is that it was what happened in 1952 at the American Capitol, where the three iconic branches of the federal government are located: the White House, the Capitol, and the Supreme Court. When the strange sightings occurred, the press and the general public demanded answers about what happened. The terrifying event immediately began to be called Big Flap, becoming part of history as one of the most special sightings of unidentified flying objects. At this time, every major newspaper reported strange sightings by civilian and military pilots and radar operators, so much so that a special intelligence unit of the U.S. Air Force was dispatched to find out what was happening at the site. The Air Force, once on site, only functioned to fuel one of the first conspiracy theories about a government plot to hide evidence of extraterrestrial life. Were these unexplained objects on radar part of a Soviet invasion, or were they really evidence of something much more mysterious? Mankind has always looked to the skies for meaning, but as our yearning for knowledge has reached farther into the depths of space, the search becomes for the answer to the question, are we alone? If you seek the truth, like, subscribe, click the bell icon. Join us. This is what the world needs. This is disclosure. If there is a country known for the number of UFO sightings, it is the United States, and therefore, at the same time, it is the country that has kept the most information secret throughout the history of mankind. From secret bases for research and experimentation to highly classified projects dedicated to the in-depth investigation of strange objects. However, despite each of the exhaustive investigations that have been made public, none have found proof of what the strange objects that fly over the skies of this world are all about. Since 2004, there have been 144 sightings investigated, of which 143 are unexplained, according to the report submitted to the U.S. Congress. But what if we were to go back to 1952, when UFOs invaded the area around the White House? The report marks a turning point for the U.S. government, after the military spent decades debunking observations of unidentified flying objects and flying saucers dating back to the 1940s. Today, it is a reality and a mystery that millions of people want to discover. It all began in 1947, when a rescue pilot named Kenneth Arnold was performing his daily flight routines. Kenneth, in the midst of his tranquility, was suddenly stunned to observe 9 saucer-shaped things flying in a diagonal line as if they were forming a chain at a superhuman speed of over 1,000 miles per hour, very close to Mount Rainier in Washington. In just a matter of weeks, flying saucer sightings were being reported all over the United States, with sightings being reported from 40 states across the nation. In 1948, Air Force General Nathan Twining conducted Project Sign, the first official military intelligence program developed to collect and thoroughly investigate sightings of strange flying objects on behalf of the nation and its security. His investigators' findings ruled out the vast majority of occurrences as hoaxes or misidentifications of known aircraft or natural phenomena. But some of those cases remained unexplained. In 1952, the UFO research unit was called Project Blue Book, headed by Captain Edward Ruppelt at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. In that project, investigations of unexplained flying objects were carried out, where even an article was made with the full cooperation of Ruppelt, where the interest of the Air Force in UFOs is explained. In that article, 10 unexplained events were presented that were identified as of extraterrestrial origin. As said in Life magazine by a space scientist who develops especially secret projects for the US, I am completely convinced that these objects have an off-world base. According to one of the world's leading news media, The Washington Post, the number of sightings of strange flying objects reported to the Air Force grew exponentially, even to the point of increasing more than 6-fold in March 1952 to more than 148 in June of the same year. By July, the perfect conditions were in place for a UFO disaster, widespread Cold War tension and fear, and the press was beset with hundreds of unexplained UFO incidents. By this time, all it took was one spark for everything to explode. Shortly before midnight on Saturday, July 19, 1952, Air Traffic Controller Edward Nugent at Washington National Airport detected 7 slow-moving objects on his radar screen far from any known civilian or military flight path. Edward took a breath, fearing it was something catastrophic, and called his supervisor and joked about a fleet of flying saucers. At the same time, 2 more air traffic controllers at National saw a strange bright light hovering in the distance that suddenly sped away at incredible speed. By this time, tension was beginning to grow between the military command and the civilians who had observed the strange objects flying overhead. And not only had they seen and heard them at nearby Andrews Air Force Base, radar operators were also picking up the signal from the same unidentified objects, slow and clustered at first, then moving away at speeds in excess of 7,000 miles per hour, inexplicable speeds only capable of otherworldly technologies. Objects capable of stopping instantly, crossing at high speeds and disappearing into space. Each of the witnesses knew very well that these were not human-made objects. Watching closely through his tower window, Controller Andrews saw what he described as an orange fireball trailing a tail. On the other hand, a commercial pilot navigating over the Virginia and Washington, D.C. area reported 6 bright lights like shooting stars without tails. Had the UFOs already arrived to invade us and fulfill their mysterious task? The sightings did not diminish. In fact, the number of people who saw these strange lights in the sky grew. When radar operators at National observed the objects whizzing past the White House and the Capitol building, the UFO jokes stopped. Nothing seemed like a joke anymore, and every movement these strange objects made caused deep tension among all observers. It was then that 2 F-94 interceptor jets flew in to monitor and control the situation, but each time they approached the locations shown on the radar screens, the mysterious signals disappeared. By dawn on July 20, there were no more traces of the objects, only the memories of each of the people who had witnessed them. And despite the seriousness of what had happened, no one bothered to notify Captain Ruppelt, principal investigator of Project Blue Book, of what had happened. He found out 2 days later when he traveled to Washington and read the news. Once Ruppelt found out, he made every effort to gather information and meet with the radar operators, but was denied the opportunity to do so. By the following Saturday, everything seemed to be back to normal, but nothing could have been a bigger lie. The UFOs returned, and this time, Ruppelt was able to find out from a call from a reporter, and he immediately contacted colleagues in the Air Force to confirm the situation, each of whom confirmed the existence of UFOs in the sky. By this time, everyone was questioning what they were seeing on radar. Couldn't these signals be caused by a temperature inversion? After all, it was a common phenomenon in the hot DC summer months. However, Ruppelt's Air Force colleagues were convinced that the objects on the radar screen were not mirages, but solid aircraft. To be sure, 2 F-94 aircraft were once again dispatched to pursue the strange flying objects appearing on the radar screen. When they arrived on the scene, the objects seemed to play games with the pilots by disappearing from where they claimed to be on the radars. Eventually, however, one of the pilots spotted a bright light in the distance and pursued it without hesitation. However, he did not come close to catching up. Later, the pilot reported to reporters, "I saw several bright lights. I was at top speed, but even then, I had no speed to keep steady. I stopped chasing them because I didn't see any chance of catching up." To the disappointment of Ruppelt and each of the people who witnessed the sighting happen, the Air Force press conference went exactly as expected. Each of the newspapers reported the temperature inversion story, and people seemed to accept it to a great extent. In 1956, Ruppelt, in his book The Report on Unidentified Flying Objects, reported that after what happened at the press conference, sightings dropped from 50 to 10 per day. On the other hand, skeptics and those who knew the strangeness of what happened were not at all satisfied with the government's response. By then, many accused the Air Force and Project Blue Book researchers of keeping information secret. But it wasn't until 1985 when the Project Blue Book documents were made public, and it was then that UFO detectives realized that it was not a government cover-up, but a conspiracy of general ignorance. The government at that time never tried to hide a terrible truth regarding UFOs, but did everything in its power to prevent people from realizing that the government really had no answer for what happened. And it has undoubtedly become a smoking gun that evidence is scarce, and answers even more so. Therefore, as an intelligent species, our job will always be to look beyond what we see to find answers to all that we are unable to explain.